Breakups are tough, even when you know they're for the best. I'd been trying to keep myself together after splitting up with my boyfriend of 2.5 years. I don't really want to get into it. It wasn't messy or dramatic. We just weren't right for each other anymore, but that didn't make it any easier. Some days it felt like everything reminded me of him. A song playing on the radio, a familiar meal, a place we used to visit together. It was like the universe was conspiring to rub salt in the wound. I'd been forcing myself to stick to no contact, telling myself that it was the healthiest way for both of us to move on. It was hard though, really hard. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying old arguments, trying to remember why we ended things. There were moments I doubted myself. One of the things I missed most about us was playing pool together. It was our thing. I'm a pretty decent player, definitely better than average, but my ex, he was incredible on his good days. He could pull off trick shots like it was nothing. 1 rail, 2 rail banks, kicks, combinations. I'm pretty sure he was even learning a standard mess. We each had pool tables at home, but obviously, we were young and staying inside every night wasn't exactly ideal. When we went out, we always made sure the bar had tables. Crowded bars with long waits and drunk frat brothers were not our scene, so we found these quieter places, dimly lit dive bars where the regulars didn't care how you dressed and the tables were just good enough to keep us satisfied. There was something intimate about those nights. Just the sound of billiard balls cracking, the low hum of classic rock from the jukebox, and our laughter bouncing off the scratched wood-paneled walls. I found comfort in those memories. Then one night, I noticed something odd. I was home, watching TV, when I saw a flash out of the corner of my eye, something moving past the front window. I peeked out, but there was nothing there. Probably just a neighbor walking their dog, I told myself. But it kept happening. Small things. The porch light flickering. My front door locked when I was certain I left it unlocked. A picture frame slightly tilted when I knew I hadn't touched it. I chalked it up to stress, maybe even paranoia. But deep down, a part of me wondered, was someone watching me? It was a random Wednesday, though, so none of my friends were free. I didn't want to sit around the house feeling sorry for myself anymore, so I decided to head out to one of the bars we used to go to. I told myself it wasn't about nostalgia, that I just needed to get out of my own head. Believe me, I'm not the type to go out alone. Social anxiety is kind of my baseline setting. But that night, I felt restless, like something was tugging at me. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and drove straight there without thinking too hard about it. The bar looked the same as ever: dim lighting, worn out stools, a jukebox in the corner with Springsteen playing softly. I half expected to see my ex at our usual table. But it was empty. I ordered a drink and wandered over to the pool table. I wasn't sure what I was doing. Playing alone was a bit pathetic, but I didn't care. Then a guy approached. Maybe mid-20s, scruffy but not in a bad way. He asked if I wanted to play. I nodded and told him to rack 'em. He fumbled with the balls, racked them totally wrong, and I laughed. We started playing, and I began to relax. He wasn't bad, and he kept the mood light. He bought me a drink. Then another. He flirted, and I played along. But there was something off. At first it was subtle. He asked a lot of questions, not just the usual small talk. Things like, do you live around here, or do you usually come here alone? His tone was casual, but the questions felt loaded. Then he started calling me by my name. I hadn't told him my name. I was sure of it. When I asked how he knew, he laughed it off, said he must have overheard it at the bar. Maybe. But my gut told me otherwise. I glanced at his hands during our third game. His fingers were stained like grease or ink. His knuckles looked raw. I told myself I was being judgmental, but my unease was growing. He leaned in during a shot and whispered, "You're even better than I remember." I froze. "Remember from what?" I asked. He just smiled. After the fourth game, he asked if I wanted to go back to his place. The question caught me off guard, but I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. I tried to keep it playful, told him it wasn't that kind of night. He smirked like he'd expected it. But then his smile faded. The shift was instant, like flipping a switch. His eyes darkened, and the air around us seemed heavier. He stepped closer, too close, and said, "I bought you drinks. I was being nice. Don't make me feel stupid." I started backing away, but he grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not enough to bruise, but enough to make it clear he wasn't playing. I said no, I told him firmly. He narrowed his eyes, and I saw something I hadn't seen before: recognition. Not just familiarity, but something personal. Intimate. And angry. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked quietly. My stomach dropped. Before I could answer, he yanked my purse off the chair and started walking toward the door. "Hey!" I shouted, finally snapping out of my shock. A couple older guys at the bar stood up. One of them barked, "Put it down." The guy stopped, turned, and tossed my purse back at me. "You'll remember," he said. Then he stormed out. I thanked the men and stumbled to the bar to collect myself. My hands were shaking. I ordered water and tried to calm my breathing. But inside, my thoughts were spiraling. He knew me. And I didn't know how. I left the bar a few minutes later and called an Uber. I didn't trust myself to drive. The ride was quiet. I stared out the window, still thinking about what that guy had said. I must have dozed off, because the driver gently shook me awake when we arrived. "We're here," he said. I mumbled a thank you and stepped out. The street was quiet. The wind had picked up. I pulled my jacket tighter and walked toward the porch. As I reached for my keys, my phone buzzed. I glanced down, and the notification hit me like a sledgehammer. "AirTag found moving with you." My blood turned to ice. Hands trembling, I dropped my purse and started digging. Lip balm, charger, makeup bag, nothing. Then, near the bottom, something small and white. I pulled it out. It was an AirTag. I stood there frozen, heart racing, breathing shallow. He had planted it on me. He knew where I lived. I threw it to the ground and stomped it until it cracked. Still not satisfied, I kicked the pieces into the street. That's when I heard it. An engine. Not close, but not far either. Slowly growing louder. I ran to the door, dropped my keys, cursed, picked them up again. My fingers barely worked. Finally, the lock turned, and I rushed inside. I locked the door behind me and turned off every light. I crouched under the window and peeked through the blinds. A car rolled by, an old, beat-up Lincoln. I couldn't see the driver's face, but I didn't have to. It was him. The car crept past my house, then stopped. I walked up to my room, wondering how I had gotten myself into this mess. Normally, I'm asleep by 10 and out cold for 9 or 10 hours, but there was no way I was going to sleep that night. I looked out my bedroom window, thinking maybe the scenery would lull me to sleep or something. As I was looking out the window, kind of mindlessly, I noticed an old, beat-up Lincoln drive slowly past my house. Nothing too unusual, but it was kind of late for cars to be driving on a residential road. But then it came back from the opposite direction, and I knew something was wrong. It passed even slower the second time, like the driver was scanning the houses. I didn't want to face the reality of the situation, but when it passed a third time, I had no choice. It was the guy. It had to be. He was trying to find my house. I wanted to scream again. The next time the car passed, the driver's side window was rolled halfway down. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want that guy to know he was in the right area. I know that doesn't make any sense, but I was so scared and couldn't think straight. The next time the car passed, the driver's hand was hanging out of the window, holding something. It looked like a knife. And then, instead of driving past, the car stopped in the middle of the road, right across from my house. I ducked down, my heart beating a million beats a minute again. I stayed there, crouched below the window, too terrified to move. By the time I looked up, the car was gone. I waited for what must have been an hour, but it didn't come back. The next morning, I told my parents everything. My dad scolded me for not calling the police, but I told him I was too scared to. He called a buddy of his, a police chief, to ask for advice. His friends said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence or the car's plate number, which I hadn't been able to see. His friend told us to call the police immediately should we ever see that car again. I didn't leave the house for days. Even now, I'm really scared that he's waiting somewhere and he's gonna see me enter or exit my house again. I haven't seen the car since, though, so maybe the nightmare is over. I don't have the most exciting life, but it's comfortable. I'm 40, single, no kids. Some people might find that depressing, but honestly, I don't mind. I've got a steady job, a decent house, and no one to answer to but myself. I work as a bartender at a high-end luxury rooftop in a neighboring town, catering to the kind of clientele who think regular bars are beneath them. I don't live anywhere near that level of luxury myself. My place is in a pretty middle-of-the-pack neighborhood, about 20 minutes away, but working there has its perks. The tips are amazing, people in that area aren't shy about throwing money around, and the rotating crowd keeps things interesting. Since the bar is upscale, we don't have the typical regulars you find in a dive. I like that. I never quite liked how close some customers would get with me, or any other bartender for that matter. Maybe that's just me, though. I like to keep to myself. I should probably mention that my name's Kevin. That'll be important later. It was a Friday night, our busiest night. The place was packed, as usual, with groups of friends clinking glasses, couples on date nights, and a few folks who probably wandered in just to feel important. I always like playing a mental game with my patrons. I try to figure out which ones are pretending to be something they're not. You can tell a lot about people by the way they order a drink. The ones who ask for complicated cocktails are usually trying to impress someone. The ones who order a whiskey neat, they've had a day. I had my eye on a couple at the end of the bar who were down to their last sips of wine. It's always better to offer a refill before they wave you down. I was in my groove, mixing drinks and chatting with customers, when I noticed someone walk in who definitely looked out of place. I clocked the guy immediately. He was clenching his teeth and scowling like he was furious. He had jet black hair that wasn't combed and sat like a bird's nest on his forehead. He was wearing a blank black hoodie under a faded leather jacket, which looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. There were stains all over it, but none of that was as unsettling as his face. Like I said, he just looked so angry. He made a beeline for the bar, but he didn't sit down. He just stood there, staring at me. I wondered to myself how he had gotten past the doorman in the lobby. I cleared my throat and asked if I could get him something to drink, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the weird vibe he was giving off. He didn't answer right away, which was strange. He just kept glaring at me like he was getting ready to swing. Finally, he muttered that he wanted a double shot of Jaeger. I nodded, grabbed a glass, and poured the shot. Jaeger isn't a drink we pour often here. Most of our patrons are likely to ask for something a little higher quality. But hey, if someone wants Jaeger, I'm not about to question their taste. I set the glass in front of him and moved on to serve a few other patrons. When I came back to charge him, he tossed crumpled cash onto the counter. That also threw me off. Hardly anyone pays in cash at this place. Again, though, it wasn't my place to judge. The guy didn't say anything as I rang him up, and I was ready to move on when he spoke again. I still remember his exact words. "I knew I'd find you here, Kevin." I froze. My eyes snapped to his as I scrambled to process what he just said. I put the glass in my hand down and demanded to know how he knew my name. I didn't want to make a scene, so I kept my voice low, but I hoped he got the gist of how serious I was. He didn't answer my question, just stared at me with the same angry intensity. Finally, he said, "I know what you did." Before I could ask him what he meant, he turned and walked towards the elevators. I wanted to yell something or chase after him, but I decided against it. I was on the clock. I couldn't just neglect my job. Instead, I just stood there for a moment, completely thrown off. I was honest to God confused out of my mind. I didn't recognize him in the slightest. I couldn't think of anything I had done that would warrant such a cryptic statement. I'm no saint, but I don't go around making enemies. It put me in a sour mood for the rest of the night. When my shift finally ended, I drove home, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier. I racked my brain for literally any explanation that made sense, but couldn't think of any. By the time I ended up going to bed, I was still relatively unsettled by the whole thing. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up randomly. I wasn't really sure what woke me up, as I didn't have to go to the bathroom and I'm usually the type of person to sleep through the night. I didn't hear or see anything, but something felt off. Without moving, I kept my eyes open, waiting for them to adjust to the darkness. After about a minute, I saw something that gave me an adrenaline rush of fear. There was a dark mass in the corner of my room, next to the door. It was just standing there, but I was 100% sure it was something that didn't belong in my room. I felt my heart start to race, but I forced myself to stay still, pretending to still be asleep. Someone was in my room. I repeated that thought to myself like 6 times before truly processing it. I knew I had to do something. I counted silently to 3, and in one quick motion, I sprung out of bed, screaming like a crazy person. I was prepared for a fight, but the figure didn't come toward me. Instead, he bolted for the door. As he moved, I heard something clatter to the floor. I chased after him through my house, but by the time I reached the front door, it was wide open, and whoever had been in my room was gone. I wanted to run out into the yard to look for him, but I was worried that I'd be walking directly into a trap. Instead, I made what I still think is the smart decision and slammed the door shut and locked it. I thought back to the clatter I had heard earlier in my room. I walked back to my bedroom, turned on the light, and froze. In the corner of the room, there was a knife, just laying there on the floor. It was one of mine, taken from the kitchen. I felt sick. Whoever I had just chased was planning to hurt me, possibly kill me. I called the police right after that, and they quickly arrived and searched both my house and my yard, but found nothing. I gave a description of the man from the bar, and the police got the video footage from my bar, but they haven't been able to find him yet because I haven't heard anything. The thing that freaks me out the most is that I know for a fact I had locked all my doors that night. I locked them every night. During their search, though, the police were never able to figure out how that man entered my house. None of the windows were broken or unlocked, and there was no sign of forced entry. To this day, I still have no idea how he got inside. I haven't seen him since, but I would be lying if I said I don't think about this encounter often. I work as a bartender at a bar and restaurant in a suburb just outside Baltimore. I'll do my best to explain the layout so the story makes sense. It's a busy place with a unique setup. There are no waiters, just bartenders like me and the cooks in the back. If you want to find food or non-alcoholic drinks, you have to order them at the bar, and when everything's ready, you grab it from the counter. I'm not sure why things are done that way, but I guess it had something to do with management being cheap and trying to avoid hiring waiters. Either way, it keeps things fast-paced, which I actually like. For whatever reason, the place is really popular, even though I personally don't think it's anything super special. The atmosphere is lively most nights, with great music, a buzzing crowd, and a standing area near the DJ booth where people gather to dance and chat. The constant flow of customers and the high energy vibe make the job fly by. I love meeting and talking to new people, so the gig is perfect for me. I would probably lose my mind if I had to wait long periods of time between serving guests, but that's just me. I bet some people are the opposite. That particular night started off like any other. It was a weekend, so things were gonna be super busy. I was ready. After a certain time, the bar started filling up with people. It looked like more of a younger, college crowd that night, which meant more dancing, more spilling, and a rowdier environment in general. Oh yeah, and worse tips, which kind of sucked for me. This one group of kids just kept on ordering round after round of tequila shots faster than I could line up the salt and limes. It's always chaos when they take over the bar. One of them was so plastered he used the same pickup line on me like 3 times. I was running around doing my thing when I noticed an elderly couple walk in and sit down at the booth in the corner of the restaurant. At first glance, there was nothing strange about them. I just thought it was interesting that 2 people that age would want to come into a rowdy place like this. I didn't have too much time to think about it though, so I went back to work. Fast forward maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I was halfway through pouring a line of gin and tonics when I noticed the couple again. My hands kept working, muscle memory taking over, but my brain was stuck on them for some reason. That's when it hit me. They were just sitting there motionlessly. They hadn't ordered anything either. No food and definitely not any drinks, I would have remembered. I looked a little closer and realized that they weren't even looking at each other. They were both fixated at the wall next to them. From what I could tell, it didn't look like they were talking either. It was the strangest thing. I was beyond curious, but the bar was slant and I had too much to do to spend time wondering about it. I figured they might be waiting for someone or didn't realize how the place worked. Maybe they were waiting for a waiter to take their order. When I finally had a break, I decided to check on them myself. I walked over to the table and put on my most polite smile. As I approached, neither of them turned to face me. They were both still staring at the wall like statues. I cleared my throat and asked them if they wanted anything to eat or drink. The woman didn't even flinch. She kept staring at the wall like I hadn't spoken at all. The man turned his head slowly, like he was moving in slow motion. When his face came into view, I felt a chill run through me. His skin was pale and wrinkled, and his eyes were almost sunken into his face completely. He didn't speak, just stared at me and shook his head once, firmly but silently. Something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I muttered something in response and quickly returned to the bar. I had the weirdest feeling in my gut after that. Those people looked like they didn't even belong in this century, let alone this bar. I didn't look over at that booth for a long time. Eventually, things started to die down a little, and I remembered the couple. I glanced over impulsively, and I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. Both of them were staring directly at me now. I made direct eye contact with the woman, but she never averted her gaze. I don't think I'd ever been more uncomfortable at my job than I was in that moment. I looked away and pretended to be busy, trying not to freak out completely. By the time I glanced back again, the booth was empty. I was relieved. I was just glad that they were gone, as mean as that sounds. By the end of the night, I was still thinking about the whole thing. As I wiped down the bar and closed up with my coworker Karen, I decided to ask her if she saw anything strange. She's, I guess, what you would call a vet. She's been working there for years and prides herself on noticing everything and everyone that comes through the doors. When I asked her about the couple, she gave me a confused look and said she didn't know what I was talking about. I looked at her blankly and told her I was talking about the elderly couple that was sitting in the corner booth. She shook her head and told me she didn't remember seeing anyone like that. She then jokingly asked me if I was hallucinating, which got a playful laugh out of me, but on the inside, though, I was losing it. I knew what I had seen. I asked her if she was sure, and she crossed her arms before listing at least 10 random people who had ordered food that night and what they were wearing. I laughed again and complimented her memory, but like I said before, I was dying on the inside. By the time we locked up, I started doubting myself. As I walked to my car, I noticed something that made me nearly drop my keys in fear. Across the street, there were 2 dark figures standing under a lone streetlight. I knew it was them. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I didn't wait another second. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without another look. The drive home was awful. I was trying not to break down the whole time. I just kept repeating, "Oh my God," over and over. I had so many questions. Had Karen somehow missed them? Were those people even real? Was I going insane? I couldn't explain it. I thought I was going crazy. I wish this story had a resolved ending, but it doesn't. I never saw those people again. I never got any kind of explanation. I don't think I ever will. The following days were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, something, was still watching me. That sense of dread hung over me, even though I didn't see the Lincoln again or hear from the strange man at the bar. I thought maybe it was just the paranoia kicking in. I mean, it was entirely possible that I was just losing my mind. My mind could play tricks on me, right? After all, I had just gone through a breakup, and emotions weren't exactly a rational thing. But then, the knocks started. At first, they were light, almost like a soft tapping on the door. At random hours. Sometimes I'd be watching TV, other times, trying to sleep, and it would start. 3 knocks. Nothing more. I'd check the peephole, but no one would ever be there. I convinced myself it was just some weird coincidence, maybe the wind, maybe kids messing around. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Something was off. One night, I decided to confront it. I sat by the door, staring at the clock as the hour grew late. My mind was racing, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Finally, around midnight, it happened again, the knock, but this time, louder. Knock. 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 I jumped up from the couch and dashed to the door. I peered through the peephole. Nothing. I waited a moment, wondering if it was a prank, but then I heard it. A voice. Low, almost a whisper. I know you're there. My stomach turned. I pulled back from the door, backing into the living room. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest. Whoever it was, they were still out there. But I wasn't about to open the door. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but they told me they couldn't do anything without more information. Then, there it was, the door handle rattled. It wasn't just knocking anymore. Someone was trying to get in. I stayed quiet, not daring to move or make a sound, my phone still pressed to my ear. The rattling stopped for a moment, then, the knocks started again, only this time, they were rhythmic, almost like a signal, like someone was trying to communicate. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. Just then, my phone vibrated in my hand. It was a text message. You won't be able to escape this time. It was from an unknown number. I froze. The rattling started again, but it was more frantic this time, desperate. I rushed to the back of the house and locked every window. My mind was reeling. The person, whoever it was, knew something about me, but what? What did they want? The following weeks felt like a blur of anxiety and fear. The knocking had stopped for a few days, but then it started again, more intense this time. The text messages grew even more cryptic and threatening. I know where you are. I see you. I'll find you. I had no idea what to do anymore. I'd even gone to the police, but there was little they could do without concrete evidence. There was no sign of forced entry, and no real proof that anything was wrong. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. I started seeing shadows in my peripheral vision, figures moving around my house late at night. Sometimes, I'd hear footsteps, but when I checked, nothing was there. It was like something or someone was always just out of reach, waiting. And then the day came when I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a notification from an app I'd never downloaded before, Find My iPhone. I clicked it, and my stomach sank. There, on the map, was an unknown device. It was moving with me. The AirTag. I had thought I had destroyed it, but clearly, I was wrong. Whoever had planted it had replaced it. I frantically grabbed my purse, emptied it out, and found the familiar small white device still intact, still tracking me. I ran outside, my breath coming in short gasps, and threw the AirTag into the street, hoping beyond hope that this nightmare would be over. But as soon as I turned to go back inside, I saw it. The same Lincoln. It was parked down the street, its headlights off. I didn't know what to do. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. And then it happened. The car's engine roared to life, and it started driving toward me, slowly. Too slowly. It wasn't just a random drive-by. It was deliberate. It was coming straight for me. As the car neared, I backed away, almost tripping over my feet. My mind was racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I couldn't escape it. The car stopped directly in front of me, and the window rolled down. I couldn't see the driver's face, it was too dark. But I didn't need to. The voice I heard wasn't one I recognized, but it sent chills down my spine. "I told you," the voice said, "you should have left it alone. You're mine now." The car's headlights flashed, blinding me momentarily. I stumbled backward, eyes squinting, heart pounding. And then, the car drove off. I stood there, paralyzed in the middle of the street, trying to process what just happened. But there was no time to think. I turned and ran back inside my house, locking every door, every window. I could hear it then, the soft sound of footsteps behind me, growing closer. And this time, they weren't stopping.